केसरिया से मन जोगी हुआ रे, दिल झूमे देखो मतवारा हुआ रे, केसरिया से मन जोगी हुआ।
हर पल मनाओ केसरी त्योहार। विमल, बोलो जुबान केसरी।
The NewsHour Special Edition.
Good evening, viewers. Thank you very much for joining us here on Times Now. This is the NewsHour Special Edition this Saturday evening, and I'm Heena Gambhir. Keep it banned, blocked, and banished. Viewers, that's the verdict of a government panel reviewing the Diljit Dosanjh starrer Sutlej. It was released on OTT platform Z5 for viewers in India on 3rd of July. 2 days later, 48 hours later, it disappeared. It was pulled off as the government used powers under a section of the Information Technology Act. As per reports, the Interdepartmental Committee that reviewed the movie invoked national security. It proposed to the government that film has the potential to threaten the security of the state. Its recommendation to keep the movie blocked from public access in the country has brought back a debate as old as our nation. Let me bring in the context here. The film, directed by Hani Trehan, starring Diljit Dosanjh, is set in Punjab of the 1990s, the days of insurgency. It is based on the life of human rights activist Jaswant Singh Khalra and shows his death in police custody in the wake of his campaign to probe hundreds of disappearances during the militancy years. The controversy seems to have pushed the government towards regulating films being released on streaming platforms, popularly known as OTT platforms. Sources say that the government is mulling changes to the Information Technology Act that would make certification compulsory for all films released for public, including those which skip release in theatres, and instead premiere on OTT platforms. What does this really mean? Now, in simple terms, it means that the government is mulling ways to regulate the content on OTT. The question is why? Because audience choices are changing. They're increasingly shifting to streaming platforms. Next, what are the existing laws? Well, movies slated for release in theatres are governed by Cinematograph Act of 1952. Under Section 4 of the Act, any person wishing to exhibit a film publicly must apply to the CBFC, which is a statutory body under Ministry of I&B. Screening uncertified films in theatres in India is a criminal offence. For OTT platforms, there is a 3-tier governance grievance structure: self-regulation by publishers, self-regulatory bodies, and government oversight through I&B Ministry under Section 69 of the IT Act. A code of ethics mandates publishers to exercise caution over content that may fall under grounds for reasonable restrictions. But is the idea of regulating OTT content new? The answer is no. There have been several attempts to regulate OTT platforms in the past as well. In 2019, Karnataka High Court dismissed a petition seeking regulation of content on OTT, also under Cinematograph Act. And surprisingly, the union government that had acted against Sutlej had opposed the plea seeking regulation. The centre's stand was that provisions of the IT Act take care of the apprehensions expressed by the petitioner. And then in 2023, Broadcasting Services Regulation Bill came. Government attempted to define OTT platforms as a broadcasting service to bring them under its ambit, but that was withdrawn. Now, the movie Sutlej has created a dispute like the waters of River Sutlej. The opposition and the government are battling over the ban, while there is also a war of words between those who are against censorship and those who are backing the regulations. Do you know, since 1955, viewers, little over 50 movies have been banned by the centre for a number of reasons. In 1963, a movie Gokul Shankar was banned due to politically sensitive issues. In 1973, Garam Hawa was banned as it was based on partition. In 1975, Sanjeev Kumar starrer Andhi was banned due to the emergency during the emergency. In 1977, Kissa Kursi was banned by Indira Gandhi government for lampooning the emergency. In 1994, even the acclaimed Bandit Queen was banned. The ban on Sutlej is facing protest. But in 2005, a movie, Amu, based on 1984 anti-6 riots, was denied rating. So tonight we debate, should the government bring the OTT ecosystem under stricter supervision and clearances? How practical such blocking can really be, because what's banned in India may be available outside India. And the bigger question, what's better, censorship or self-regulation? And to discuss it, I'm joined on this debate this evening by my guests. We have Tushar Gupta, political analyst, Kunika Sadanand, who is an actor as well as an advocate, Sumit Chandar, advocate Supreme Court, Nasir Abdullah, who is an actor, Imran Ahmed Ali, lawyer and political analyst. Good evening to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us here on Times Now this evening. Kunika Sadanand, let me begin this discussion with you. I want to understand from you, over the last few days, we all have discussed what's happening with the film Sutlej, the political controversy around it. But tonight, we want to focus on whether regulation is the answer, regulation of films, content on OTT platform. Where do you stand on this?
So, hi, Heena, thank you for having me on the show. This debate is now, it's reached a point about who gets to tell history. How do democracies, deal with some uncomfortable truths, and the national security and freedom of expression. These are the four things that I'm going to speak about. When you are asking about censorship on OTT, I think that's going to be very farcical, because OTT you can download, you can get a link to it. And once the film is released, pulling it down, I think that's absolutely wrong. However, I have a mixed opinion on a lot of blood and gore that is shown on OTT platforms. But then again, self-regulation is what I think people should exercise. But there's a problem here. You don't mind Kashmir files being shown. You don't mind, any other kind of propaganda film, Kerala stories. But you have a problem with film on Punjab. Now, Punjab has dealt with a lot of turmoil. There's been a lot of ups and downs in its history. If the government is saying it is national security risk, then they should explain. Let somebody come and tell us which is the scene. And if that scene is kept in the film after the CBFC sort of censorship, then why did they take it off the OTT? Or was it not censored by CBFC? Is it only for OTT? All these questions need to be answered, because a lot of things are unclear. I mean, even when I was approached, I had to do a lot of studying and reading about it. But film is being seen, and now people are getting more interested. So has the government really served its purpose by pulling down the film? And does the government really have control on the OTT platform and can make the film be pulled down? Because I know that the Z5 has a history with the government. They are also politically connected. Maybe they could have influenced them. But another channel, maybe Netflix, will they be able to influence that OTT platform? That's also a question.
Okay. Interesting. You've raised a couple of points, but I think on my direct question, your answer is that self-regulation is the need of the hour instead of regulation by government of the OTT content. In my understanding, that's of you. Tushar, where do you stand on this particular debate? Kunika feels censorship is subjective. What is your point of view? Because in this case, we know that there were a lot of hurdles that this particular film had to face initially, and I believe CBFC had recommended some 120 plus cuts.
Good evening, Heena. Look, Kunika here says censorship is subjective, but so is the description of propaganda, so is the definition of propaganda. A Kashmiri pundit will say that the Kashmir Files shows the movie as it is. A terrorist will say that Kashmir Files is propaganda. The same story about Satluj. A Punjabi Sikh who was impacted by the events will say that this movie portrays the truth. The family of a slain Punjab police officer will say this movie is propaganda. That is where you have to get out of this fight about subjectivity and let the the law of the land take its own course. One thing, I think we give movies too much importance when it comes to telling history. To say that a movie is the depiction of history is an overstatement, it's an exaggeration. At best, a movie is a small reflection of the events of the past. Now, in an ideal society, censorship shouldn't happen, but we are not an ideal society. Sometimes the government oversteps, sometimes the filmmakers overstep. There's no, regulatory line. There's no self-regulation on both the sides. That is where, again, you go back to the law. Now, did films like Kashmir Files or even Dhurandhar, for that matter, massive hit, they did not go through the CBFC. They did not have to comply with the cuts. In fact, the second part of the Dhurandhar movie, why its reels were reaching late into a lot of cinema halls, was because of the cuts that the CBFC had ordered. But they had to comply with the law of the land, despite the first part being a super hit. So you cannot go ahead, flout the law of the land and say we are going to have an OTT release and expect the government will not take action. In fact, it defeats the entire point that some artists say that there should be self-censorship or self-regulation. Because when you see the demand side overstepping its line, then the supply side, which is the government, will also sort of get a stronger line, a stronger law side, legal line. And that is where artists whose movies lose. But again, we have to understand we are not an ideal society. Movies, OTT series, they have a potential to disrupt normal life, create a law and order situation on the ground, create 1,000 things. You do not want censorship, sure. Okay. But then it's all about interpretation on the ground. And that is why I think let the law of the land take its course.
So if I have understood you correctly, you are for some kind of a stricter supervision
Absolutely.
for content, films being released on OTT. Okay, I'll come to you.
One second.
Okay.
It's not just about the political definition of this movie. Sometimes it's also about vulgarity on OTT.
Okay.
Sometimes it's also about the kind of shows that you have a people locked up inside a house shouting and screaming at each other for 90 days. Someone will say that it's not healthy for kids. So that is where regulations help.
Okay. Nasir Abdullah, where do you stand as far as this debate is concerned? Because, when Satanic versus Salman Rushdie's book, Bandit Queen, were banned, questions at that time were asked as well. Who should really decide? What public should see or read?
Okay, I agree with actually Kunika to a great extent when she mentioned about Kashmir Files and the Kerala Files, where, especially in the Kerala Files, there was a lot of lies involved. They said there were 30,000 women who went to fight. There were actually 3. So that is another story. But if the government feels that there is a real threat to national security, I say yes. Insist on the bans or whatever, or the cuts. But I don't see, because this is based on facts. This was a banker who got wind of this thing happening, which happens in all the countries of the world. Whenever there's extremist activity, the people in charge of the police force and the military, they have to indulge in excesses, and a lot of innocent people, they get wiped out. That's a known fact. So I understand this is the way it works, but then if it's a factual thing, and it's very good in a way to show this thing on our screens, OTT especially, that this is what happened. And the gentleman who did the expose, he was also killed, and the people who had him killed went to jail for life. So if it's all based on atrocities and illegal criminal cremations, then I think the government should be able to allow the film to go. Maybe a couple of the cuts here and there, but I think they might be worried about the fact that there's a new resurgence of the Khalistani movement or something. They may be afraid that this will give another impetus to the Khalistani movement, which I think is sort of gone and faded. But I don't think the government needs to worry that much. If it is based on the truth and there were atrocities committed by any department of the police force or the army, it happens all the time. Whenever the army happens to take over, there is the pillaging, there is arson, there is rape. All that has happened in the past. I've heard so many stories. I mean, it's happening in Gaza.
Well,
as you
Well,
know,
we've
they
heard those
actually,
arguments many times in the past as well.
so
Wherever
I
there
think
is army, there is rape. But, I don't think you should be making these kind of irresponsible statements, saying that wherever there is army, there are atrocities, there are rapes. I mean, I think it's a fairly irresponsible statement that
they
you
are.
have
Some,
made.
not
I don't
all.
think it is
Some,
appropriate.
yeah.
I
That's for you to
really,
say. But it has happened.
I won't
It is
allow
known-
the
it happens all
platform
over
to
the
be
world.
used to
It happens
spread.
all over the world. It happens all over the world.
Yeah, but you can't
It's
just say
happening
wherever
now
there
in
is army,
Gaza.
there are
It's happening
atrocities,
now in
there are
Gaza.
rapes.
What are you
I'm
talking?
sorry. I'm
And
sorry.
everybody knows about
I
it.
don't really agree with
Everybody
that.
knows about
I'm
it.
not.
It's too
I
okay.
don't really
Yeah.
agree with that.
Don't be sorry.
Okay.
Don't be sorry. It's
Okay.
Don't be sorry.
No, you can't just
Don't be
generalize
sorry.
the statement
I'm
and say
sorry.
wherever there is
I'm
army, there
sorry
are
for bringing
atrocities,
it
there
up.
are rapes.
I am sorry. I am sorry. There are, but not all of them. Some of them, because they have a free hand. That is what happens. It happens all over the world. I'm not saying India.
You apologize
It's
for
all
what you
over the
said, so
world.
we'll end that point there only. We'll end that point there only. Let's come back to the point that we are discussing. We are discussing tonight not what Sutlej is presenting. We are discussing tonight is this example being used by the government to somehow try and regulate the OTT content. Is that something that India needs at this point in time? Should government be deciding what we read, what we eat, what we see? Imran Hemdali.
Heena ji, yesterday's champions of liberty are today's custodians of censorship. If your commitment towards artistic freedom ends with where your disagreement begins, it was never about freedom at all. When you talk about freedom of speech and expression, maybe not absolute. However, when it comes to the context of this movie in particular, there are some bitter truths. Now, I'll tell you personally. Both my grandfathers were in the IPS. My paternal grandfather, in fact, was from a neighboring state, Haryana. Now, going by what my predecessor said, first, I, from a police background, am willing to tell you that a lot of this movie in the real life actually happened. Don't take my word for it. Come to Punjab, go to any village, and this is a very big statement, and ask them if these horror stories were not the truth. Now, your problem, whether it be in the diction of truth. Now, Tusharji very correctly said, he said that there has to be a reasonable restriction. But where does that restriction go when it is a pro-government movie? It does not exist. Now, today you are dealing with an uncomfortable truth and you are telling people, now look at OTT platforms, whether you talk about actors and actresses who've got a fresh lease to their careers, whether you talk about brilliant documentaries like The Family Man, which would have never been in existence if OTT did not have a free hand. Today you are wanting to regulate what I watch in the four walls of my home as an adult. It just goes on to say that what is the level of freedom of speech and expression that you wish for citizens of your country to exercise. Today, OTT platforms give access to regional content, regional directors, people with smaller budgets and come up with brilliant movies. Now look at this movie in particular. Years in red tape gets published on an OTT platform for 2 days, and now the fact that the government is going ahead and supporting a ban makes everyone think, oh my god, what is this that the government actually wants to ban? You have only created a loss to the makers of the movie. I can tell you personally, and I refuse to watch the movie in a pirated version on my telephone, but my question to you is only one. You're trying to stop people from watching a movie, but it is being publicly broadcasted in villages on projectors. Somebody who wants to see it can just go onto their WhatsApp and ask one group, can you forward me the movie, and they will watch it. But you are only creating a precedent that if you make a movie that shares an uncomfortable truth, you will only be in losses. There will be pirated versions that will be all over the internet. Today, tell me one of us who has gone and watched the movie in the theater or has not watched it and has not received a copy online. I myself I've seen 3. It is my personal choice that I don't want to create a loss to the producers by going and watching the pirated version. And I, coming from the family that I am, I would trust my government to have the guts to at least let adults What is the
Okay.
point of ratings? Make it 18 and above, make it 21 and above. But let it in my four confines of my house. Don't try and even regulate that. You want to regulate with what women have to do. You want to regulate what they should wear with respect to hijabs. You want to regulate what I should see on my private television in my private home. I mean, where is the limit?
Okay.
You will just go on and on with these regulations.
Okay. Okay. Tushar wants to come in, but before
And
that,
where
let
is
me
creative freedom?
Okay. Tushar wants to come in, but before that, let me get in the opening comments from Advocate Sumit Chandar as well. You know, a point that Imran made, I mean, how practical such blocking can really be, because what's banned in India is going to be available somewhere else in other parts of the world. And also legally, do you think it is possible for the government already has a section through which, if there is something which is, against national security, it can be taken down the way it has happened in this particular case? So do we actually have legal provisions to bring OTT content, films being released on OTT under some kind of a regulatory framework?
Yes, Heena, I think that's something very important for all viewers to understand as to what are the laws in existence and how and what are the powers of the government to bring about those changes. Now, if you look at it, there is presently no legal requirement for any film which is released on the OTT platform to obtain a CBFC certification, which is a Central Board of Film Certification. This came up in 1952 under the Cinematograph Act, and it was required certification for all the films which are exhibited in theaters. OTT platforms came up comparatively recently, and they are regulated by the Digital Media Ethics Code and Rules of 2021 under the Information Technology Act. So comparatively much recent laws. Now, OTT, as rightly pointed out by you and some of the speakers, is that it follows a system of self-classification and publisher responsibility, not a censorship by the government as of now. Now, why the government chooses or not to decides to go ahead and come with further laws requiring certification of a similar kind in today's context of OTT might be for various reasons, like pointed out earlier by some of the speakers. One, to maintain public order, to ensure sensitivity about historical and political subjects, and possibly to have uniform standards for all kind of cinemas coming up, whether on OTT or on theaters. Now, very rightly, people need to understand that the Constitution under Article 19 gives you the right to freedom of speech and expression. It's a fundamental right.
Right.
Now, under 19(1)(a), of course, the courts have various times held that Constitution includes artistic and cinematic expressions. There is no doubt over that. At the same time, Constitution under Article 19(2), there is a sub-provision of under 19(2) which permits reasonable restrictions on the grounds of public order, decency, morality, sovereign integrity of India. Now, having understood that there is already a constitutional provisions protecting and giving these safeguards, also Supreme Court has gone into this details time and again, where it has been held that yes, films especially have a unique impact on the medium of expression. It has an impact on the people.
Right.
Now, Ranganarjan case also, in Jagjeevan Ram's case, where Supreme Court said that there must be a proximate and direct nexus between that expression and the anticipated danger. So government needs to go on to all this. I'll conclude by just saying this, that end of the day, Parliament certainly has the legislative competence to regulate the OTT platforms. However, any law introducing the compulsory certification like the CBFC will have to satisfy the constitutional safeguards and test of reasonableness under Articles 14 and 19 which I just mentioned. That has been the law, that will remain the law.
Okay.
In short, in one line, if I have to conclude, Heena, certification should regulate the content, not the creativity.
Okay. Tushar, what will you say? Because, points were made about films like Kashmir Files, Kerala Story. They were allowed to be released. They were made tax-free as well in several states in the country. But questions are being raised with this particular film. The point really is that, it's based on the facts. Now, that's the most important phrase here in this discussion that we also had just now. At times, movie do distort facts, and there is creative freedom, another phrase that's used to justify it. The point really is, who decides what's the most authentic part in a story?
The law. It's a simple answer. The law decides. When artists go around on national television saying that whenever the army is given free hand and rapes happen and destruction happens, you can trust artists not to have the common sense to decide what is good for the country at large and what is good for or not good for national security interests. Let's be very clear about that.
Okay.
We all talk about creative freedom, but artists do not have that bandwidth to understand national security implications. Number two, everyone is sort of here interpreting the situation that the movie release will somehow harm the BJP. The BJP or the Aam Aadmi Party were not even the political stakeholders when these events unfolded. The BJP, the movie releases or doesn't release, it doesn't impact their political fortunes. So I don't know where it becomes about the BJP. Number three.
Kunika wants to come in. I'm completely out of time because she's raising her hand as well. Kunika, very quickly.
So there are 2-3 things I want to respond to Tusharji. First of all, he said that there is a show where people are locked up for 90 days and people watch when they are abusing each other. You have to subscribe to that channel. So if you pay for that channel, you see it. If you don't want to see it, don't subscribe. Second thing, he just said that artists don't have the bandwidth to decide what is good and what is bad. That's ridiculous. The government cannot play parents patriae. In the law, there's a place where the courts can decide as parents, but the government cannot. The government cannot tell us what to eat, what to wear, what to. But listen,
what do you make of Nasir's comments?
Don't make everyone
one at a time. Both of you, please calm
down.
down.
I want to tell you that I don't agree with him. I'm an officer's daughter, an Air Force officer. I don't agree with him, but what he's saying is partially correct, okay? And I also want to say that democracies are strongest when they can deal with the most uncomfortable histories.
Okay.
And if you have a problem and you say that this, by the way, it does not go against the BJP, but the BJP is supporting SAD.
Okay.
The party which they want to woo, because Punjab elections are due. Don't forget that, Mr. Tushar.
Well, right now they haven't really spoken of any kind of an alliance with Shiromani Akali Dal, but we'll see what happens. I think it's been a wonderful debate. We got the viewpoints from all the sides here. We let the viewers decide what should really be done in this country. But clearly, this particular episode, the Sutlej controversy, has triggered something within the government, and clearly government is now mulling some kind of a regulation for films being released on OTT. We'll see what happens there, but thank you very much all of you for joining us here on this debate.